When the Hero of Time was called to embark on another journey and left the land of Hyrule, he was separated from the elements that make him a hero. It is said that at that time, the Triforce of Courage was split into 8 shards and hidden throughout the land. Even I do not know where they rest. But this much I do know. They lie hidden somewhere in this great sea. The Triforce of Courage is the only key that will once again open the doorway to Hyrule. You must search for it. This is Legendary Adventures, a Legend of Zelda playthrough podcast. This week we're completing the Triforce of Courage and venturing below the waves once again for a final confrontation with Ganon. Link's quest for the pieces of the Triforce of Courage may be the most controversial part of this game, even more so than the game's looks. It's a clear nod to the original game, with Link being tasked to collect 8 pieces of the Triforce in order to face Ganon. It's also a much more flexible quest than it's often given credit for. I suspect most players save the bulk of the quest for the third act of the game. I ended up doing that for this playthrough of the game, but it is possible for players to collect 6 of the 8 shards before visiting the Wind Temple. I have often done that before. The game even hints to players fairly heavily that they can, and maybe even should do this. Players can start the quest as early as their first visit to Windfall Island. Freeing Tingle from jail and helping Mrs. Marie with the unruly killer bees are the first steps of the quest. When freed, Tingle will hint that he is the person to see about charts. He also provides players with a chart showing the location of his island, and 2 Great Fairy Fountains. These fountains hold wallet upgrades, one of which is essential for completing the quest in the GameCube version. The upgrades raise Link's wallet capacity to 1,000 rupees and then 5,000 rupees respectively. Players can also freely explore the world following the completion of the Forbidden Woods, and they can find and collect Triforce charts and Triforce shards. The charts need to be deciphered before they will reveal the location of the Triforce shard. Tingle charges an odd fee of 398 rupees for a deciphered chart. Players have a 200 rupee limit at the start of the game in the GameCube version, meaning they will have to visit at least one of the 2 fairies pointed out to the players in order to complete the quest. The game begins to explicitly point players towards the quest in the second act. The King of Red Lions tells Link how the Triforce was separated after the Hero of Time left on another journey. And he tells Link that he must collect the pieces in order to return again to Hyrule. Tingle will also send Link the Incredible chart in the mail. The chart was added to releases of the game outside of Japan. It is sent by payment on delivery, and players need to pay a fee of 201 rupees to get it. The fee being 1 rupee beyond what players can afford with the standard wallet is not arbitrary. It forces players to get one of the required wallet upgrades in order to get the chart. The Incredible chart plainly lays out the location of each of the Triforce charts, and after those charts have been deciphered, the location of each of the Triforce shards. The HD version of the game made a number of changes to this quest in order to streamline it in response to player criticism. Some changes make the quest more rigid, such as players being required to free Tingle on their first visit to Windfall. Others make it less so. Link now starts the game with a 500 rupee capacity in the HD version, meaning he never has to visit a Great Fairy in order to obtain the Incredible chart or to get a Triforce chart deciphered. The HD version also reduces the number of Triforce charts from 8 down to 3. In place of the other 5 charts, players are awarded a Triforce shard directly. As I mentioned, the Triforce quest is one of the most criticized parts of the game. I personally have never had an issue with it. It's flexible enough that players can tackle it throughout their playthrough, but it is common to hear people complain that the quest slows the pace of the game. Series producer and original Wind Waker director Eiji Aonuma told MTV in 2013, the streamlining of the Triforce quest was one of the biggest changes he wanted to make when returning to the game. He said, "Once players hit the Triforce quest, all of a sudden there are things that they have to do in order to reach this goal that seems really far away. Certainly when we were developing the original Wind Waker, I wanted to make these adjustments, I just wasn't able to do that. So the overall balance and tempo of the game should be improved." He acknowledged that he and his fellow developers were aware of the fan criticism, but he also said that he and the developers noticed issues with the quest themselves after the game was released. "We certainly pay attention to fan opinions, and we did hear some of those," he said. But even right after the game was completed, the original game, people would play it, staff would play it, and there would be discussions about how we wish we could have done something about that area of the game. As noted in the first episode of this season, the developers did make a few changes to streamline the quest from the original Japanese release to the North American and PAL releases of the game. The pace of the HD version is much quicker, and I do enjoy the HD version overall, but I don't know that I love all of the changes that were made, particularly when it comes to the economy of the game. The Wind Waker throws rupees your way fairly often, and this works well in the GameCube release of the game because players genuinely need more rupees in order to decipher all the charts. If players use the Tingle tuner, they are more likely to spend more money as well. In the HD version, there are fewer charts and no Tingle tuner, but the developers still upped the amount of rupees that players can receive. All chests that I pulled up from Small Rings of Light in the Great Sea were worth 50 rupees. In my experience with the GameCube version, it's much more common to find a red rupee worth 20. I feel that I run into Link's rupee limit much more often in the HD version than I do in the GameCube version, and I don't always have something to spend that money on. It's not a big deal, it's more of a nitpick than anything. But I do think the quest was good as it was originally designed, and I also think it's good as it was redesigned in the HD release. The developers obviously prefer their redesign, with Aonuma saying in an Iwata Asks interview in 2013, "If you fix it like that, it gets dramatically better, so much that you think, why didn't we do it this way in the first place?" Late Nintendo head Satoru Iwata then added, "Miyamoto-san often says that if you make the same game twice, it gets better, which is something to reflect upon. But I always say, yeah, but you usually can't do that." He laughed. I rounded up 4 Triforce charts in my GameCube playthrough and 1 shard and 3 charts in the HD version before reaching the third act. I found them on Bird's Peak Rock, the Islet of Steel, Needle Rock Island, and Outset Island. In the past, I have done much more. I did not really plan out any particular route for this playthrough of the game, however, and as such, I generally stayed pretty close to the questline as it was outlined at that particular moment. As a result, I wound up with the bulk of the quest to complete here in the third act. To the south of the Tower of the Gods and northeast of Forest Haven, there sits a curious island. It is home to someone. Much of the island is occupied by a private cabana. It appears luxurious, even resort-like. Link, however, cannot enter. The door features a carving of a butler in it. This carving is alive and it denies Link entry. He's not the owner after all, and he's dirty from his adventure. As we were playing together, Mandy actually talked a bit about how dirty Link must be from his adventure. Here's some of what she had to say as we were playing with the Tingle tuner in the Forbidden Woods.
"If you get too close to this, it shuts too, Mr. Fairy. Have you been taking baths? Apparently you're too stinky for the door." I mean, does Link ever take a bath? Really? I mean, that's a lot of fighting. I would assume that you work up quite a sweat, and he's always in long sleeves, pretty much.
Pretty much.
Like, maybe in Breath of the Wild. He's practically naked at the beginning of Breath of the Wild.
In the water
I guess yeah, but there's no soap in that water. Like, let's be real here. This guy's getting a little ripe.
On Windfall Island, Mrs. Marie may appear to be a simple school teacher, but there are hints that she enjoys the finer things in life, and has wealth to support that enjoyment. She gives Link relatively sizable monetary rewards for helping her with the killer bees, and for giving her a joy pendant. She wants 20 joy pendants overall, and when players do give her all 20 of them all at once, she will in turn give them the deed to her private cabana. She admits that she hasn't made much use of the cabana, and much like with the rupees, she urges Link to keep it a secret that she gave it to him. When the deed is presented to the door/butler, it allows Link into the home, recognizing its new master. The private cabana features a large fireplace, a sliding puzzle minigame that players can take on to earn rupees, and a large bath which Link never uses. A fishman tells Link to search the house top to bottom for a chart or piece, depending on the version, of the legendary Triumph Forks. A grappling hook point sits near the ceiling. It is a switch and Link's weight activates it. It shuts off the fireplace, allowing Link to drop down a hole into a structure beneath the house. It's a mini-dungeon which spans 2 floors. The upper level floor is flooded, and various rooms of the floor are gated off. There are holes leading to a lower level. On the lower levels, Link can crawl through mazes of small passageways in order to reach other portions of the house. The passageways are made out of different materials, allowing Link to note and navigate the maze based on the appearance of the crawl spaces. There are some optional rooms which mostly contain pots with rupees inside. An optional treasure chest holds an orange rupee. The rupees, while ultimately optional, are there to help cover Tingle's chart deciphering fee, so they are worth picking up. As Link moves through these passages and then back up to the first floor, he will find skull hammer switches, which open the gates, allowing free movement through the various parts of the first floor. There are few enemies beneath the cabana. Most are rats, which can largely be ignored. Players will know that they are near the Triforce chart or shard when they find 2 redeads in one of the holes. Most of the holes on the lower level have a ladder in them. The hole with the redeads does not, signaling to players that they are on the right track. Players use the Wind's Requiem at a small shrine in the back of the cabana to reveal a chest which contains a chart in the original version of the game and a Triforce shard in the HD version. East of the private oasis and southeast of Great Fish Isle, Link finds Stone Watcher Island. This island holds the 4th and final Stone Watcher, which are massive stone heads scattered across the Great Sea. Using the power bracelets, Link can lift and throw the Stone Watcher aside. Beneath the stone head, he finds a combat-focused mini-dungeon. It's built around a circular central room. There are 6 doors in the room. One is the entrance, and one is the end goal. That door is barred shut. The other 4 doors are open. The open doors have torches above them. Through each door, players will find combat challenges. The rooms can be tackled in any order. One room contains Armos statues, a second a pair of moblins, a third a pair of wizrobes, and the final room a group of bokoblins. Once all 4 rooms are complete, a pair of darknuts appear in the central room. Once they fall, the final door opens, allowing players to collect a Triforce chart or shard. The final 2 shards can only be collected after players visit the Wind Temple, because they require the Hookshot to obtain. The first is found on Overlook Island, which sits to the northeast of Dragon Roost Island. This island appears to be mostly man-made. There are 4 flat-topped spires which rise from a low rock bed of the island. The spires are topped with palm trees. Using the Hookshot, Link can scale the towers by latching onto the trees. The final tower has 2 levels. The lower level has an entrance which Link can drop into. Inside the island, Link finds a second combat-focused mini-dungeon. It holds the same layout as the one found on Stone Watcher Island, but the enemies here are tougher. The first room holds green bokoblins, the second a trio of Armos knights, the third a pair of Stalfos, and the fourth a pair of wizrobes which can summon other enemies. Once all 4 of these rooms are cleared, 4 darknuts appear in the central room. After the central room is cleared, players can collect the chart or shard. The final shard is held on the ghost ship. There are several hints about the ghost ship dropped throughout the game, with Lenzo and the Fishmen offering perhaps the most substantial hints. It appears only at night, and where it appears depends on the phase of the moon. The moon phases are a new addition to the Wind Waker. There are 7 phases, which the moon cycles through with each day that passes. The ship can appear at Great Fish Island, Crescent Moon Island, Diamond Step Island, Bomb Island, the Mother and Child Islands, 5-Star Isles, and the Starbelt Archipelago. The ghost ship, however, is intangible. It is a ghost after all. In order to get inside, players must first find the ghost ship chart. Lenzo explains that legend holds the man who drew the chart died unexpectedly upon completing it. The chart is found at Diamond Step Island. Players can only scale the island with the Hookshot. At the island's peak, there is a hole to drop down. Inside, players find a cave filled with the hulls of wrecked ships and warp pots. The pots form a maze for players to navigate. The correct pot will take players further into the cave through the wrecked hulls. An incorrect pot will take players back to the start. With the exception of the very first pot, all of the pots have wooden lids, which must first be burned away or destroyed. I generally burn away only one at a time. This helps me keep track of where I have been. Traveling through the first pot, players need to travel to the pot immediately in front of them to keep moving forward. Then through the pot to the right when they emerge from the third pot. When players emerge from the fourth pot, there are 2 pots to the right. They need to take the pot to their left to find the chest containing the ghost ship chart. The chart reveals the current phase of the moon and which island the ship will appear at. When players sail on a collision course for the ship with the chart in hand, they are transported inside. Players face a combat challenge which is much like those found in the submarines scattered across the map. Players must defeat a Wizrobe and 2 Poes in order to reach the chest. The Wizrobe can summon other enemies, so there may be more monsters to defeat. There is a single shaft of light which players can use to defeat the Poes. The appearance of the ghost ship marks a significant change between the original and HD versions of the game. The GameCube version features a subtle fog effect on the ground, in which ghostly faces can just barely be made out. The upper portion of the ship is largely missing, exposing a swirling sky filled with ghostly faces. In the room with the treasure chest, there is an image of a face on the wall. It holds a neutral expression until players draw near. Then it transforms into a demonic face with an evil smile. In the HD version, the fog effect on the floor is no longer subtle. It's much more opaque. The floor appears more purple, and the ghostly faces are plainly visible. The walls now have a texture which makes it appear that the boards are broken and missing. However, the open ceiling of the GameCube version is gone. Players can't see the swirling ghostly faces outside the ship. The image of the face above the treasure chest also now does not change in the HD version. It maintains a neutral expression throughout. Once the chart or shard is collected, a ghostly scream is heard. The ship then disappears, never to be seen again. To the southwest of Windfall Island, a spire rises from the sky. The top of this spire rotates around. This is Tingle Island. The island itself is relatively small and flat. Tingle and his brothers live in something resembling a totem pole. Carvings are stacked on top of each other depicting choo-choos, moblins, fairies, and at the very top, just above a platform, Tingle himself. The top part rotates around. Tingle has 3 brothers, though only 2 of them are actually related to him. One brother, Knuckle, only appears if players have completed the Tingle Tuner quest on Outset Island. In the HD version, players can make him appear by collecting all of the Tingle statues, which they reveal with their own bombs. Tingle and his biological brothers are the spitting image of each other. They are distinguished by the color of their clothes and the design of their rosy cheeks. Knuckle has open circles on his cheeks. He's the artist of the family. He carved Tingle Tower and the Tingle statues. On the tower platform, 2 of Tingle's brothers work night and day to make the top portion spin. In pink is Ankle. His cheeks have a closed oval on them, and he rewards Link with rupees for finding Tingle statues. In white is David Jr. He does not have rosy cheeks. He also lacks the beauty mark that the other Tingle brothers have and has different eyebrows. This is because he is completely unrelated. David Jr. was shipwrecked on Tingle Island and was forced by Tingle to work for him. David Jr. often wishes that Knuckle would replace him in turning the tower. In the Japanese guidebook, Mitsuhiro Takano explained why he decided to have David Jr. be unrelated from the other Tingle brothers. He said, "He's kind of the gag character of the family." He laughed. "I figured it would be boring if all 4 were siblings, so I thought it would be funny to make one of them a complete stranger, and gave him a name that doesn't follow the existing pattern." He laughed again. Tingle charges 398 rupees for each chart he deciphers. Once deciphered, the location of the Triforce shard will be marked on the Incredible chart. Players can also use the Triforce charts, like standard treasure charts, to track down and pull up pieces of the Triforce. The shards are located at Gale Isle, 7-Star Isles, Great Fish Isle, Stonewatcher Island, Southern Triangle Island, the Cliff Plateau Islands, Outset Island, and Two-Eyed Reef. In the HD version, there are only 3 charts and 3 shards to pull from the sea. They are at Great Fish Isle, Stonewatcher Isle, and the Cliff Plateau Islands. Once all 8 shards of the Triforce are collected, they fuse together to form a complete triangle, the Triforce of Courage. Returning to the Tower of the Gods, Link lifts the Triforce above his head to show the gods. The portal to Hyrule opens. The Triforce disappears and goes into Link, with a symbol of the Triforce now appearing on the back of his hand. The King of Red Lions says it's a sign that Link is now a true hero. He dubs him the Hero of the Winds. The pair then descend once again beneath the waves. Once back at the castle, Link rushes to the basement where he and the king left Tetra at the start of the second act of the game. She appears to be standing right there where they left her, but when Link approaches, she disappears in a flash of light. Link can hear the voice of Ganon mocking him. He says he has taken Tetra. claiming that there is no safe haven from him. Flames surround Link, and 2 powerful Dark Nuts appear. These are known as Mighty Dark Nuts. They're a more powerful variation of the standard Dark Nut. They have capes which protect the straps of the armor on their back. The capes need to first be destroyed, meaning that 2 hits to the back are required to remove their armor. Otherwise, they're fought the exact same as Dark Nuts. Once the Dark Nuts fall, Link can head out the front door of the castle. If he attempted to head this way in the past, he would be prevented from traveling beyond the castle walls by a magical barrier. But, with the fully powered up Master Sword, Link slashes at this barrier, and it shatters like glass. Players then venture out into Hyrule. This is not a big explorable area. Players are limited to a relatively narrow path. There are ruins of the kingdom which can be seen just beyond the bounds of the path. A black tower can also be seen in the distance. The path leads to that tower. Link will encounter monsters along the way. He has to use the Hookshot to clear a couple of gaps in order to enter the tower, which is the final dungeon of the game. Ganon's tower is separated into 3 distinct sections, and it features 2 different musical themes. The first and third sections share one musical theme, while the second has a theme all of its own. The music of the first and third sections is a new arrangement of Ganon's theme. It first appeared in A Link to the Past, and it continues to this day to be the primary theme of Ganon. This arrangement is played on piano. There is a counter melody which has a slightly whining, distorted quality to it. I can't place the instrument, but I suspect it might be a distorted synth voice. The first segment of the dungeon presents players with 4 doors. They lead to 4 different challenges based on 4 of the game's dungeons. Players need to complete all 4 challenges to open a 5th door inside the mouth of a massive horned and tusked skull. This setup recalls Ganon's castle from Ocarina of Time, which also featured challenge rooms that were largely based on second act dungeons from Ocarina of Time. The dungeons represented in this challenge in the Wind Waker are Dragon Roost Cavern, the Forbidden Woods, the Earth Temple, and the Wind Temple. That there are only 4 of the dungeons represented in the Wind Waker here makes sense. Of the other 2 dungeons, the Forsaken Fortress was a very different experience. It bookended the first act of the game and was more free-flowing and less structured than any other dungeon. While the Tower of the Gods is excluded, because that dungeon is explicitly stated to be a test designed by the gods to test heroes. Ganon was not involved with the dangers found inside that dungeon. The challenge rooms can be taken on in any order. Each one is guarded by a bokoblin, and each one features a uniquely designed door frame, which reveals which dungeon the challenge is based on. In my HD playthrough, I tackled the Earth Temple challenge first, followed by Dragon Roost Cavern, then the Forbidden Woods, then the Wind Temple. On the GameCube, I played through the challenges in the order that the dungeons were tackled in the game. Each challenge ends in a rematch with the boss of the dungeon that the challenge is based on. Repeated bosses are a common element in the Zelda series. Every game in the series prior to the Wind Waker has featured at least one repeated boss. The rematches are framed as some sort of time travel. The bosses and their arenas appear in black and white, like Hyrule Castle did before Link acquired the Master Sword. Link's equipment is also limited with each boss. Bottles and non-combat related items are carried into each fight, but items used in combat will more or less match what Link could have had on hand by the time he faced that boss. Players hear each of the returning bosses' unique musical themes as they battle these bosses, but they feature heavy distortion. Here's the music for Goma. Here's the music for Kali Demos. Here's the music for Jalhalla. And here's the music for Mulgera. After completing all 4 challenges, the door inside the skull crumbles away. And Link can ascend a staircase to reach the second segment of the dungeon. The music of this segment is short and suggestive. It features an ostinato broken up by, well, I don't know if you would call it a melody, but a repeated pair of notes stepping upwards. To me, it sounds as though they are played on electric piano, with a bell-like tone. There are two open doors, one to the east, one to the west. A doorway to the north is bricked up and has a boar-like design painted on it. The rooms to the east and the west are mirrors to each other. There are two differences. The room on the west has a pool of water. The room on the east has a gaping hole. The room on the west has crystal switches hung on the wall, while the room on the east has torches. The torches sit under carvings of the bosses. When players enter the room to the east, the camera zooms in on each of the torches. They all have a different number of flames lit on them. The torch under Mulgera has 1 flame. The torch caddy corner from it, under Goma, has 2 flames. There are 3 flames next to the single flame torch, under the Jalhalla carving. And there are 4 flames under a Kali Demos carving right next to the 2-flame torch. The King of Red Lions tells Link through the Gossip Stone that he must remember the shape of the room, and the number of things on the wall in order to solve the riddles ahead. In the room to the west, the camera zooms in on the crystal switches, in the same order that it zoomed in on the torches in the room to the east. This hinting is pretty heavy-handed, putting up a big flashing sign signaling the solution to the puzzle. I never really understood why the developers were so heavy-handed with this particular puzzle, but there must have been some testers who were really stumped. At any rate, players use the boomerang to hit the crystal switches on the west in the same order as the torches on the east, to reveal a dark portal in the water. The King of Red Lions appears. It explains that Ganon used this portal to ascend above the waves. We can use the portal too. It'll take us back to the surface if we want. Link and the King of Red Lions emerge in the Forsaken Fortress, and they can round up items or just explore more before the end of the game. The presence of this portal should tip players off to the way forward. Players need to return to the room to the east and leap into the hole to descend lower into the maze. There is a tablet just above the hole, which has a message from Ganon explaining that the sword hilts of his servants point the way to him. On the lower level, players come to a Lost Woods-like maze. There are doors in each of the cardinal directions in a circular arena. Phantom Ganon appears. He's added a new attack since the Forsaken Fortress, where he creates copies of himself to surround Link. Players can jump out of the Ring of Phantoms. After they attack, the copies all disappear, and players can act quickly and hit the real Phantom. His other energy attacks from the first encounter in the Forsaken Fortress also return, so players can also engage in a game of Dead Man's Volley to damage him. After taking a single hit, the Phantom disappears, leaving his sword behind. It will fall with the hilt pointing towards the door that Link needs to walk through in order to advance. After hitting Phantom Ganon and following the sword 5 or so times, players arrive in a room with only 2 doors. One's the entrance that Link came through, the other the exit. The doors are barred shut, and the Phantom appears again, and again falls after a single hit. But this time, a chest appears with the dungeon item. It's the light arrows. After passing through the final door, Link returns to the upper room, with the doors on the east and the west. Phantom Ganon appears for a final time. A single shot with a light arrow destroys the Phantom completely. Its sword drops to the ground, with the hilt pointing towards the bricked-up wall. When players use the Phantom's sword on the bricked-up door, it disappears in a flash of light and a puff of smoke. The third section of the dungeon then begins. Players ascend 4 flights of stairs, with a combat encounter on each landing. First a Moblin, then a Darknut, then 2 Moblins, finally 2 Darknuts. Players can fight each monster the standard way with Link's sword and items, or they can destroy them all with a single shot from a light arrow. Once all the monsters on each landing are destroyed, the door to Ganon's chamber opens. The chamber is round and massive. It's multiple stories tall. A shallow pool of water fills the interior of the room. There's a circular platform above the water at the very center. The platform is surrounded by sheer curtains. A large bed is in the center of the platform. Tetra, in her Princess Zelda attire, lies beneath the covers. A shadowy figure sits on the edge of the bed, his back to Link. "Do you sleep still?" Ganon asks the pirate princess. Ganon then acknowledges Link, and claims that he can see Tetra's dreams. With his hand over her head, he describes what he sees. Oceans as far as the eye can see. They are vast seas. None can swim across them. They yield no fish to catch. The Dark Lord then asks, "What did the King of Hyrule say? The gods sealed Hyrule away, and they left people behind who would one day awaken Hyrule? How ridiculous. So many pathetic creatures scattered across a handful of islands, drifting on this sea like fallen leaves on a forgotten pool. What can they possibly hope to achieve? Don't you see? All of you? Your gods have destroyed you." Ganon then challenges Link and begins to transform. His arms grow, lengthening with a sickly crack. Is that the cracking of bones? Or is that wood and string being pulled taut? The growing form of Ganon stretches to the ceiling. The bed disappears. The curtains pull up, revealing a massive puppet in the shape of Ganon in his pig-like demon form. The puppet growls, and the fight begins. The fight against Puppet Ganon plays out in 3 stages. Each stage has its own musical theme. The first stage features music that is moderately paced with militaristic drums, dramatic stabbing strings, and brass which largely performs descending lines. The whole piece is tense and it has an edge to it. The puppet is largely made out of orbs. It will punch at Link as it moves around the room. The end of its tail has a bright blue orb on the end. This is the weak spot. Players will need to use the boomerang to cut the string holding the tail and then shoot it with a light arrow. I generally cut most of the strings holding up the puppet. There is a large red string which cannot be cut, so the puppet will never fully fall or stop moving. The puppet cannot attack if the strings to its arms are cut, but occasionally Ganon will pull the puppet up to the ceiling and restring it. It will be restrung each time the orb on the tail is shot. Occasionally, bats fly down from the upper part of the arena and attack. These occasionally drop hearts and magic refills. After 3 hits to the tail of the puppet, it's pulled up to the ceiling and transforms. The puppet becomes a giant spider with the boar-like head of Ganon. A new musical theme plays. It features a faster tempo and a marching bass line. The strings stab at a high note, occasionally with a flourish leading into the stab, before settling into a regular staccato descending line, punctuated by stabs. About 40 seconds into the piece, a B section is introduced, with an even faster pace. This faster paced section lasts about 20 seconds before the bass line slows, its pace transitioning into the marching pattern from the first section. The spider puppet stays at the top of the chamber and spins around. After a moment, its spinning slows, and it drops down to the floor in an attempt to crush Link. The weak spot remains on the tail. Players need to look down into the pool of water on the floor to track the orientation of the spider. As it drops, players have to get out of the way to avoid being crushed, while also being sure they're in a position to strike the weak point with a light arrow. After 3 more hits, the puppet transforms again. The puppet transforms into a snake-like, or maybe that should be worm-like form. The head is still that of a boar, and the puppet moves around wildly, bouncing off the walls, attempting to strike Link. It's reminiscent of Moldorm from A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening. The music picks up again, anchored by a regular pulsing rhythm. The melody has a new arrangement of the Ganondorf fight from Ocarina of Time. This particular theme is probably in the running for my favorite boss theme of the Wind Waker. It's frantic and it's exciting. The fight itself is much the same. In the GameCube version, Link cannot move while aiming his bow. Because of this, I largely stood in the same place, and tanked damage as needed as I tried to get a shot in on the weak spot. In the HD remake, Link can move around while aiming. I was constantly on the move, doing my best to dodge the puppet's movements and to get shots in with the light arrows. I never collected the magic meter upgrades in the HD version, so I ran out of magic partway through the fight. I had to use the Hookshot to reach shelves high up on the wall, which held torches and pots to refill my magic meter. After 3 hits on the worm-like form, the puppet is destroyed. Ganon stands in the rafters of the Great Tower. Tetra is tucked under his arm, unconscious. He declares his belief that Link is the hero of time reborn. He calls on Link to face him and ascends further into the shadows on the upper end of the tower. Using the red rope, Link follows, climbing up into the rafters. Players use the grappling hook to ascend higher, going up 2 additional levels. On the top level, there is a warp pot. It connects to a second warp pot on the bottom of the chamber. Players can take a moment of respite here. They can turn around and backtrack, restock, and prepare further for the fight if they wish. Once players are ready, however, they can use the hookshot to reach a high door on the ceiling near the roof of the tower. Ganon stands on the roof's edge, overlooking the sunken Hyrule. In a moment of humanity, he speaks. "My country lay within a vast desert. When the sun rose into the sky, a burning wind punished my lands, searing the world. And when the moon climbed into the dark of night, a frigid gale pierced our homes. No matter when it came, the wind carried the same thing, death. But the winds that blew across the green fields of Hyrule brought something other than suffering and ruin. I coveted that wind, I suppose." Design manager Satoru Takizawa talked a bit about Ganon's personality and appearance in the Wind Waker in the Japanese Guidebook. He said, "Ganondorf to me is the embodiment of villainy. I really enjoy the idea of the villain being the antithesis of the protagonist. While the baddie is a persona whose brutality must be overcome by the player, he also has an admirable sort of charm. That's what I was aiming to capture as I designed him." He continued, "The Wind Waker takes place in an era far removed from Ocarina of Time, so the character has lost that air of youthfulness that he had in those days. At the same time, and in contrast to his ambition then, he's also imbued with a certain sense of resignation. He's known for a long time that he can't escape his destiny of pursuing the Triforce, but even so, he hasn't given up on his pursuit of the Hyrule of old." Atop the tower, Ganon moves in to claim the other pieces of the Triforce. He strikes Link, knocking the Master Sword from his hand. The sword lands dangerously close to Tetra's head, but it does not pierce her. The 3 pieces of the Triforce emerge from the hands of Link, Tetra, and Ganon and form together. Ganon calls his wish to the gods, wanting the kingdom to be surfaced again, but under his control. Before he can touch it, however, the spirit of the King of Red Lions appears in human form and touches the Triforce. He offers a wish of his own. He wishes for a future for Link and Tetra, for Hyrule to be washed away. The magical barrier around the kingdom starts to fade. Water begins to rain down. Ganon laughs. A laugh of madness. Link and Tetra awaken. "I'm sorry I overslept," Tetra says to Link as she hands him the Master Sword. "I think it's time for us to say goodbye to this place. We must return to the world above, back to our ocean." While he has showed restraint in not killing Link or Tetra till now, with his victory snatched away from him, Ganon decides he will try to snatch away the victory of the king. "Allow me to show you just what hope you have. See how much your precious Triforce is worth," he yells as he draws his swords. The final battle begins. Link and Tetra fight together. This is the first time in the series that the particular Link and Zelda of that game have fought together in the final fight. Zelda has helped to some degree in the past. She and the maidens opened Ganon's tower in A Link to the Past, and Zelda assisted Link in escaping from the crumbling tower in Ocarina of Time. She also joined with the sages at the end to seal Ganon away after Link dealt the final blow. This time, however, she's directly involved in combat. Players as Link engage with Ganon in a one-on-one sword fight, while Tetra wields Link's bow and fires the light arrows at Ganon. This fight is a wonderful spectacle. Ganon hits hard when he does land a blow, but I don't feel the fight is overly difficult. The fight plays out in 3 phases. In the first phase, Link and Tetra both attack Ganon. He will be stunned when hit with an arrow, allowing Link to land blows. Link can also parry attack. After Ganon takes enough damage, he sheathes one of his swords and then knocks Tetra unconscious with a backhand blow. The second phase of the fight then begins. Link and Ganon fight one-on-one. A parry attack will briefly stun Ganon long enough for Link to get in some extra hits. After landing 2 parries and a few hits, Tetra again regains consciousness, starting the third phase. In this phase, Ganon has wised up. He now blocks Link's parry attacks, and he leaps over any arrows that are fired at him. After a number of missed attacks, Tetra will suggest changing their strategy. She will fire her arrows at Link. If Link has his shield up, the arrow bounces off and then hits Ganon. If players parry attack after Ganon has been hit, Link leaps high in the air and drives his sword directly down. With the sword driven straight through his forehead, Ganon lets out his last words. "The wind, it is blowing," Ganon says with a chuckle. He then turns to stone, becoming that Arthurian sword in the stone. The King of Red Lions reappears. "I have lived regretting the past. I have faced those regrets," he says, as a sad rendition of the Hyrule Castle theme plays. "If only I could do things over again. Not a day has gone by without my thoughts returning to my kingdom of old. I have lived bound to Hyrule. In that sense, I was the same as Ganondorf." But the king explains that he wishes for Link and Tetra to live for the future. He asks for forgiveness on behalf of their ancestors for the world that they have left them. Tetra begs the king to come with them, saying they can use their ship to find a new land, a new Hyrule. "Ah, but child," says the king, "that land will not be Hyrule. It will be your land." The water plunges in, completely drowning the kingdom. Link and Tetra are protected by magical bubbles which surround them because of the king's wish. Link reaches out for the king's hand. At first, he does seem to reach towards Link, but then drops his hand again. Link and Tetra float to the surface. The king stays behind, beneath the waves, sunken and forgotten with the rest of his kingdom. When they reach the surface, Tetra has transformed. She now looks like the pirate captain she has always been, no longer the ancient princess. Her pirate band appears with Errol on board their ship, and they rescue Link and Tetra from the ocean. The credits roll. Afterwards, the pirate ship and the now inanimate King of Red Lions are docked at Outset Island. The 2 boats are about to set sail. The islanders have turned out on the beach to wave goodbye. The wind picks up and the boats begin to leave. They have no set destination in mind. Tetra says, the wind will be their guide. That's it for this week's episode of Legendary Adventures Podcast. Next week we'll take a look at the world and legacy of the Wind Waker. If you want to follow along and you haven't already, please subscribe. If you've already subscribed, thank you. You're amazing. I am Paul Riley, and I will see you next week.